Hey everyone, this is going to be a quick presentation giving a brief introduction to AutoHotkey. This presentation will explain the bare minimum necessary to get AutoHotkey up and running for the first time, show a few example scripts that can demonstrate core AutoHotkey functionality, as well as give some tips and tricks for improving the user experience at the end. You are encouraged to pause and follow along with this presentation, running example scripts for yourself to better your understanding of the program. In my opinion, coding of any kind is always best learned by doing. So, what is AutoHotkey? AutoHotkey is a free, open-source custom scripting language for Microsoft Windows, initially aimed at providing easy keyboard shortcuts or hotkeys, fast macro creation, and software automation that allows users of most levels of computer skill to automate repetitive tasks in any Windows application. This guide uses a procedural approach to coding a AutoHotkey, which essentially means lines of code will be run sequentially from top to bottom. This is the simplest and quickest way to develop scripts and hotkeys that can repeat a sequence of actions. AutoHotkey can be used in an object-oriented approach as well, but these techniques will not be covered in this presentation. Here are a few examples of what AutoHotkey can do for you. It can launch programs, open documents through File Explorer, and quickly fill in frequently used names, titles, or fields. Most importantly, it can emulate keystrokes and mouse clicks, which is instrumental to any use of AutoHotkey. In order to set up AutoHotkey, navigate to AutoHotkey.com/download. Here, you'll be able to download either the AutoHotkey installer or a .zip folder of the AutoHotkey application. Download the installer if you have installation or administrator privileges to your PC. This will be more convenient in the long run if you plan to use AutoHotkey intensively. Otherwise, downloading and extracting the AutoHotkey.zip file will be just fine to get things started. If installed, you will be able to right-click anywhere on your desktop or within File Explorer, hover over New, and select AutoHotkey script. This will make a new .ahk file. Right-clicking this .ahk file will open up a menu where you can choose to edit the file, which will automatically open up your new empty script in Notepad. Once saved, you can simply double-click the .ahk file to run the script. If the installer was not installed and you simply downloaded and extracted the AutoHotkey.zip file, you can create a new notepad.txt file anywhere to get started. Simply right-click anywhere on the desktop or within File Explorer, hover over New, and select Text Document. Double-clicking this file will allow you to edit the script in Notepad. Once you want to run whatever you've coded, you can right-click this .txt file, hover over Open With, and select Choose Another App. A pop-up will appear, and you can click on More Apps at the bottom. Then select Look for another app on this PC, and then navigate to the extracted AutoHotkey folder, selecting to open the text file with AutoHotkey U64. This will run the text file as an AutoHotkey script. The last thing to be covered before diving into an actual example script is the built-in script called windowspy.ahk. It is an essential script that comes with AutoHotkey by default, and it allows you to observe the current coordinates of your mouse cursor on your screen. These coordinates are given as an XY pair in the second text box of the Windows Spy program. The first set of coordinates, denoted screen, are absolute coordinates based on your screen size and resolution. I recommend that these coordinates be used for simplicity. Window and client coordinates are also given, which give mouse coordinates relative to whatever active window or program is active. These tend to be more inconsistent, especially if navigating between multiple programs within a single script. Furthermore, windowspy.ahk gives coordinates based on a screen size. So 0, 0 is at the top left corner, and the y-axis is notably inverted such that it increases from top to bottom. Finally, here's an example script. This script demonstrates many of the example functions of AutoHotkey, including moving the mouse, clicking, and sending keyboard inputs. Note that this is a script that runs continuously and activates upon a certain key press. Looking at the very first line of the program, you see Q::, some white space, and then a semicolon with a comment. This is the syntax used to map the key Q to a bunch of subsequent actions. This means that every time you press Q, the program will know to execute the actions on the following lines. Going back to the first line, everything that comes after a semicolon is non-executable code, commonly referred to as comments. These are used to explain to a reader what a certain line or block of code is supposed to accomplish. Moving on to the second line, there is a command called coord mode mouse screen. This is used to define the coordinate mode of the mouse. Here, I chose to use screen rather than the aforementioned window or client modes. The third line issues the mouse move command, followed by a coordinate pair. 575, 1060 happens to correspond to the screen location of Google Chrome in my taskbar. The fourth line issues a click command. Because I have just moved my mouse pointer to hover over Google Chrome with the previous command, this click has the effect of opening up the Google Chrome application. The fifth line of code combines the functionality of mouse move and click into one line. By typing click followed by a coordinate pair, AutoHotkey will issue a click command at the given point. Here, it serves to click within the address bar of Chrome. The sixth line of code showcases a really important command, send input. Send input is how AutoHotkey emulates keystrokes. Because the address bar of Chrome has now been selected, send input followed by a URL will instantly type this URL into the address bar. Send input can be used to emulate the typing of any, Send input can be used to emulate the typing of any string of text. On the next line, we can also see that send input can be used to emulate the key press of certain special keys. Keys such as the Enter key, the Tab key, and the Backspace key must be wrapped in curly Q brackets. If these words are not wrapped in curly Q brackets, the word would simply input it as text rather than as a special key. A list of all special keys is included in the hyperlink to a general AutoHotkey tutorial at the end of this presentation. The last line of the first block of code is the return command. This command signals the end of a key mapping. What this means is that the key press Q is mapped to all commands between the first line and the return command. The last three lines of code is another key mapping. This time, the escape key is being mapped to a single command, exit app. This command will stop the script from continuing to run in the background. It is always best practice to include this key mapping at the end of any script in order to quickly terminate it and regain control of your mouse and keyboard, just in case things get out of hand. Now, I'll quickly discuss the general syntax of conditional statements. These conditionals are essential for including simple logic within your future scripts and can be extremely powerful for discriminating among multiple choices or different conditions. These conditional statements are very similar to those used in any other programming language, or even those in Microsoft Excel functions. AutoHotkey uses an if, else syntax structure as shown. The curly Q brackets are optional, but included for readability. The first line contains a condition that evaluates to either true or false. In the case that this condition is true, the executable code that follows the first if statement will be run. Everything else will be ignored. If the first condition is false, the program will then read the second else if condition. If this is true, the executable code that follows this second else if condition will be run. If the second condition is also false, then the else condition will catch everything else and be run. Note, you can have if statements without else if or else conditions, but you can't have else if or else statements without an initial if statement. Here's one easily imaginable example of an if statement in action. Imagine that you have a checkbox on a web form that you want to have checked. If you just had a command to click the checkbox, it would check off the checkbox if the checkbox was initially unchecked, but it would actually uncheck the checkbox if the checkbox was initially already checked off. We could use an if statement here to say, hey, is the checkbox already checked? If so, don't click the checkbox. Else, go ahead and click the checkbox. Now, I'll quickly explain how to repeat a certain block of code with loops. The syntax for loops in AutoHotkey is very simple, just a loop command, and all the repeated code enclosed within 2 curly Q brackets. One cool feature of AutoHotkey is that there is a built-in predefined variable called a_index that automatically keeps track of which iteration the loop is on. It basically counts how many times a loop has been repeated. I'll go over this more on the next slide. Combining or nesting iterations and conditionals is a very quick and powerful way to build fairly complex logic in a script. Here's another example of a script. The script itself is on the left, and the output of the script is on the right. Unlike the first example, this example does not run in the background and map a certain key to a series of actions. Instead, this script automatically terminates after completion of all executable code from top to bottom. The first line of code issues a run command of the notepad.exe application. The second and third line is a simple example of an if statement, but it also includes 2 functions that we haven't seen before, the winExist and winActivate functions. The winExist function takes in a text string and outputs either true or false. When winExist is given a string of text that exactly matches the name in the header of a window, winExist will output true. WinActivate is a simple command that brings a window to the front and quote-unquote activates it. In this screenshot, both windows are inactive, as you can tell by the grayed out headers. The Windows operating system usually only has one active window at a time. Now, because the first line of code runs the notepad.exe application, which always opens up a new untitled notepad file with the specific untitled -notepad name, the winExist function will output true. Thus, the if statement is evaluated as true as a whole, and the winActive command is executed. Next, we have an example of a loop. Following the loop with a comma and the number 3 tells AutoHotkey to run the code within the loop exactly 3 times. Here, I've sent the text "Hello World" 3 times. Because the notepad file that was opened up on the right has been activated by winActivate, we can see "Hello World" typed out 3 times on the first line. Next, we have a more complicated example of a loop that nests some if statements inside of it, as well as makes use of the a_index variable. On the first pass-through of this loop, a_index has the value of 1. Thus, a_index is not greater than 25, so the break command is skipped, and we move on to check the second if statement. A_index is indeed less than 20, so the continue command is executed. This command skips everything else in a loop and goes back to the beginning of the loop. Now we're on the second pass-through of the loop, so a_index is now 2. This is still not greater than 25, so we skip the first if statement again. It's also still less than 20, so we continue again to the third iteration. Once again, this is not greater than 25, but still less than 20, so we continue again. We keep continuing until our 20th iteration, where a_index has a value of 20. Once this happens, a_index is not less than 20, so the continue command is skipped. The loop finally gets to run the 2 following send input commands. The first one displays the value of a_index. Note that in order to display the value of a variable, the variable must be surrounded by percentage signs. If the percentage signs weren't included, the program would simply type out the word a_index. So because the percentage signs were included, we can see that the value of a_index, which is 20, has been inputted right after the 3 hello worlds. The second send input command presses the enter key to bring the cursor to a new line. Once these 2 send input commands have been executed, the loop still continues onto its 21st iteration. The if statements both evaluate to false again, and the send input commands are executed again. This prints out 21 on the next line of the output notepad file. This continues 4 more times. Finally, on the 26th iteration, the variable a index has a value of 26, so the first if statement evaluates to true. Then the break command is executed, which terminates the loop. Once the loop is terminated, there is no more executable code within the entire script, and the script itself terminates. Here's a list of commonly used commands for your convenience. To review, the send input command emulates keyboard inputs. The sleep command pauses the script for a given amount of time in milliseconds. For example, sleep 2000 will pause the script for 2 seconds. This command is really useful for allowing web pages to load. The click command issues a click at a given screen coordinate. The coord mode command sets up the coordinate system used. The exit app command closes the script, and the return command signals the end of a key mapping. A complete list of commands and all their functionality is given in a hyperlink at the end of this presentation. When you're using AutoHotkey for yourself, it's important to break down the process into simple steps. Ask yourself the question, what is the order of mouse clicks and keyboard inputs necessary to solve the problem? Here's a real example of a script I was using to delete requirements in EMIS. This script mapped the B key to click a requirement, wait for the page to load, click on the window, send a Ctrl-Shift-D command to delete the requirement, wait for the page to load, and then confirm the deletion of the requirement with the Enter key a bunch of times before clicking back to the Requirements Browse page. It's important to remember that even though AutoHotkey can open files, applications, and web browsers, you probably only want to automate the repetitive part. It's probably not worth your time to start the automation from opening up a browser and then typing in the URL and then navigating to the proper fields, etc. You can skip to the part that's actually repeating and then focus your efforts to just automate that part. Once you've gotten to a point where you can map a single key press to perform a task once, you then might consider copy-pasting that code into a loop so that you can repeat the code however many times you need to. Alternatively, you might want to just keep your shiny new script and run it over and over again manually, just in case there are any errors. Finally, here's a list of helpful links. The first hyperlink goes to a very robust, well-written, and easily digestible tutorial written by the creators and super users of AutoHotkey. The documentation there is extremely thorough, and many useful examples and exercises can be found there. The second hyperlink is to a forum post where someone has compiled a useful list of AutoHotkey scripts that interface with Microsoft Excel. I haven't used this specifically, but it might prove to be useful given the amount of data stored in spreadsheets in our department. Stack Overflow is another fantastic resource. It's a community of hackers, computer scientists, and techies that can answer questions for you. Googling questions you have and finding a relevant Stack Overflow post is usually the quickest way to troubleshoot a tricky script. The next hyperlink will bring you to a complete command list in AutoHotkey with all corresponding documentation. This is extremely useful. Finally, if you are actually planning to use AutoHotkey regularly, I highly recommend you actually install the program instead of opening text files with the AutoHotkey U64 application. I also encourage you to follow this final hyperlink to a 5-minute tutorial that will teach you how to install Notepad++. Notepad++ is an alternative text editor that you can set up with AutoHotkey so that commands in AutoHotkey will autocomplete. It will also highlight key commands or syntax within AutoHotkey, and it will catch any spelling errors you make. You can also adjust the visual theme of Notepad++ so that you can have a dark mode to reduce eye strain. Here's what Notepad++ looks like when it's set up. It's extremely easy to set up, and I personally believe that it dramatically improves the AutoHotkey script writing experience. With that, thanks for listening, and I hope you learned a thing or two about AutoHotkey.